What did you make of Brian Flores' lawsuit filed yesterday?
The Rooney Rule was put in place in 2002, Rich, due to the credible threat of litigation from Cyrus Mehri and the late Johnny Cochran. That's what got the Rooney Rule enacted. Now, I don't know that they had somebody ready to go. Dennis Green was between jobs with the Vikings and the Cardinals at the time. I could see him being willing, given that he was mid-50s at the time, trading the rest of his career to be the pioneer in a case that you could argue needed to be brought at some point. In the 20 years since then, what's really happened? What progress has been made? What can you do to ultimately convince the owners of these teams to do something that approaches what objectively could be considered the right thing when you consider just the raw numbers? I mean, the raw numbers speak for themselves, but I think they never dreamed that anyone would trade in, or at least risk trading in, the balance of his coaching career to be the one who pushes this cause. Now, maybe the risk is unfounded. Maybe Brian Flores will still be a coach. Maybe somebody will look past it. Maybe he won't get the Colin Kaepernick blackball treatment moving forward. But you at least come to the table, if you're Brian Flores, knowing that you are risking that when you do this. And I think the league never anticipated that anyone would do it. I didn't think anyone would do it, and I definitely didn't think somebody under 40 would do it. I thought it would be a guy closer to the end of his career.
So now that he has done it, what happens?
Well, the first step will be an effort by the league to force everything into arbitration. These coaching contracts all have a clause requiring any disputes to be resolved through an arbitration process that conveniently and strategically requires that the commissioner or his designee will resolve all claims, which is not the best way to get fair and balanced justice from any type of a system, and I'm sure that fight will happen first. It's the first shot that they fired at John Gruden, and it'll be the first shot that they fire at Brian Flores. And if it happens, the problem is, for those of us who are very curious about how this all transpires, what occurs, what evidence comes out, we'll never have an open court proceeding. There'll never be an opportunity to really understand what the evidence is, what the arguments are, what the outcome would be. I mean, I assume we'll know the outcome, but we won't know much more than that if this thing ultimately goes to arbitration. But that'll be the first fight. And then at some point, he'll have to prove his case, just like Colin Kaepernick took depositions, got documents. He'll have to prove his case. And along the way, he hopes, and his lawyer suggested earlier today on CNN that other coaches are going to actually join him in this effort. And that would be amazing if it happens, because there's strength in numbers. The more black coaches who are plaintiffs, named plaintiffs in this lawsuit, the harder it will be to blackball all of them, and we'll see if that comes to fruition. And maybe others will decide to join him, and arm in arm, they will protect each other and maybe advance their long-term career interests.
Well, I mean, and as I mentioned, and I need to repeat it every single time, because there's nothing worse than racism. There's nothing worse than judging somebody by the color of their skin, and certainly judging them adversely and affecting their professional abilities because of the color of your skin. But him saying as well in this whole process that Stephen Ross had asked him to not only tank but tamper as well, but tanking through money. I mean, what happens with that one?
And
Mike?
That really doesn't fit with the rest of the case, but this is the risk you take when you invite this kind of bombshell litigation. It's possible that there'll be some related allegation that could potentially take over, especially in the short term. This idea that Stephen Ross allegedly offering $100,000 for each loss in 2019, and I firmly believe that Stephen Ross wanted to tank wire to wire in 2019 so he'd have the first pick in 2020. Originally, that was for Tua Tagovailoa. After he broke his hip and Joe Burrow emerged, it became Joe Burrow as the object of Stephen Ross's affection, and he couldn't trade up from number 5 to number 1 to get him. And I'm sure that the success of Joe Burrow has stuck in his craw because he wanted his team to be in position to get that number 1 overall pick.
And also, let me just jump in here, though. The 5 that he was at was because the Texans were the ones that were performing so poorly, and Miami had that draft choice because of one of the trades that Bill O'Brien made involving Laramie Tunsil. Right, so he had that. The Dolphins had that pick. It was their own that, according to Flores, they were trying to improve all the way to number 1, and that wasn't even close because I mean, it was obvious from the very beginning that Flores had this team in the right direction based on what they did.
Early on, they lost 59-10 to the Ravens in Week 1. Then they lost again. Minka Fitzpatrick wanted out and got traded. And I think at some point Brian Flores realized this full season tank thing isn't going to work. And I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. And I'd speculated after he got fired that may have been the first moment where the relationship between Ross and Flores got wobbly, and based on this lawsuit, it seems like that's exactly what transpired. But, Rich, I don't know how the league doesn't aggressively investigate that, and then the follow from Hugh Jackson, the former Browns coach, who suggested, along with the executive director of his foundation, that bonuses were paid to Browns coaches and executives for losing in 2016 and 2017, and they were awful both years, and they got the number 1 overall pick in the draft, which became Myles Garrett and Baker Mayfield, respectively. You have to investigate it. You have to take it seriously. In the age of legalized gambling, the idea, even if it's not a Tim Donaghy situation where someone is engineering the outcome of a game for gambling interests, but you're still deliberately not winning, according to the allegation, you're not winning games because of a strategic reason. And the NFL always pushes this idea that every game, every team, in every game, always trying to win. We know that there's a flaw in that thinking. Once you're eliminated from playoff contention, what do you really win by winning games? What do you gain by losing? Well, you get a higher draft pick, and you see what those picks are worth when teams trade. Look at what the 49ers gave up to go from 12 to 3 last year. It happens every year. What Washington once gave up to go from 6 to 2 to get RG3. You give up a lot. Those spots have value. They just have to do something about it. They can't brush it under the rug. And they already have Congress on them for the Washington football team workplace misconduct investigation and the potential that there was a cover-up there. I think it's just a matter of time before Roger Goodell gets another letter seeking information about Stephen Ross, Jimmy Haslam, and possibly pointing toward a hearing where people are going to have to answer some tough questions in an open committee chamber.
And what about finding out who texted Bill Belichick, right? Because it's that. I mean, how about the fact that Belichick's phone was potentially involved in this?
It's amazing. Yeah. And to have a quote from Bill Belichick with an F word, unredacted, and look, I've been involved in plenty of lawsuits on both sides, representing the defendant, representing the plaintiff, and you have they call it the style of the case. Brian Flores, plaintiff versus NFL, and there's a line. And usually right under the line, it says complaint. Right under the line in this one is in bold face, Bill Belichick F-bomb, where he's acknowledging he made a mistake by congratulating Brian Flores instead of Brian Daboll for becoming the next coach of the Giants before Brian Flores ever even interviewed for the job with the New York Giants. And that's when Flores realized something was amiss. And, to have Belichick pulled into it, his phone pulled into it, he's going to have to testify. This thing is going to be a mess for the NFL, regardless of where it plays out. And it's something that is going to last for a while unless the NFL resolves it quickly. And, they're not wired to do this. I heard you talking about the statement earlier, the NFL saying right out of the gates the claims are without merit. How do you know they're without merit? How do you know? Well, that tells us they're going to fight. That's the clue. They're going to fight. It would be wise for them to try to resolve it, but they're going to fight it, and they're going to fight it. And, I think that was the attitude they originally had with the St. Louis litigation, and 6 years later they ended up paying $790 million.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.